I think for a long time, I was hesitant to refer to it as abuse, but neglect is abuse.
Yeah.
So, like, I didn't even want to think of myself as being a person that was abused because it felt like it diminished people who had more severe abuse than I did. But like,
Sure.
neglect is abuse and abuse is abuse. Like,
Yeah.
it just is what it is. And so, like, coming to terms with those things, but those were the only times there's ever been a conversation about it. It was just
So,
never discussed.
so you say your parents recognized it, but like, do you think it just kind of got out of hand and it was easier? I mean, with 7 kids, is it easier just to be like,
Out of sight, out of mind.
yeah, and they're not ferrying 7 kids to and from school. Like that's a sizable minivan that you gotta have to ferry that many kids around. Well, do you think it just kind of got out of control and it was easier for them that way?
I think so. And I think that you also reach a point where, like, it's not like my mom went to school to be a teacher. So
Shut
there's
up. What?
I said she didn't. She didn't.
Okay. Golly. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. All right.
So she didn't. So I think there was a point where even if she was trying with the first few,
Yeah.
it's going to get out of hand. And you're going to hit a point where the things they need to learn are things you're incapable of teaching them.
Hello there. Welcome to a very interesting episode of Grinding to a Halt. My name is Ross Greene. I've been asked by our regular host, Zach, to host today's episode because we have a really great conversation about an interesting topic that he has lots of knowledge on. And instead of him interviewing himself, he asked me to step in and ask him any questions that come to mind about homeschooling. I do have an interest in this. I was not homeschooled. But we discuss my interests and his very unique experience with homeschooling. We talk about his family. We talk about people he knows that was homeschooled. We talk about the benefits and the downfalls of homeschooling. We talk about organizations and literature that can help people either find out more about homeschooling or recover from homeschooling and what that can do to kids. So yeah, really interesting conversation we've had. It was a pleasure. I hope that you all enjoy and get as much information out of it as I did. So, yeah, another episode of Grinding to the Halt with me, your guest host, Ross Greene, speaking to Zach Van Nuss. All right, bye.
Fade in. Wherever makes sense. Also, that Matthew Lillard shirt.
Thank you. Thank you. I wore it for you. My wife got it for me, and it's incredible. I love the guy.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
All right. Good morning, Zachary. How are you, my man?
I am good.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that.
It's just already awkward being on the other side.
Well, the good thing is, right, it's very early in the morning. So, all the awkwardness can be down to the lack of coffee or
product placement. What? Thank you, Dwayne Johnson.
We can chalk out to that, and hopefully, as this goes along, it'll get less and less awkward.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining me. I was given an opportunity to. I'd say, what? Let me do this. Let me introduce you. Today on Grinding to a Halt, I have a very special, kind, talented, friendly, beautiful man. Now I am honored to call my friend, and he's not only a father, a hardworking man, podcaster, energy drink enthusiast, tattoo enthusiast, all around great guy who is on the podcast this morning to talk about a subject that I know very little about. But I'm very interested. It does actually touch home to me. But this is the episode about homeschooling. And Zach, I think, has had a very interesting take on this subject that I cannot wait to hear about. And so, good morning, Zach. Thank you for joining me.
It got more awkward, actually. You said it would get less awkward.
It's just going to get more and more awkward.
So, having a podcast, I have found that I'm very comfortable reaching out to people and being like, hey, you should come on my podcast. But there's nothing more embarrassing than asking someone to listen to my podcast or saying that I have a podcast. I have found it's really weird because I will email, I will DM literally anyone, like some people that I should have no business trying to get that are like, hey, you should come on this show.
Yeah.
But then like people I work with, I don't want to tell them to listen to my podcast.
I don't know why. Like, podcasts seem so commonplace at this point that I don't know why it is somewhat embarrassing to say, I have a podcast. I mean, I think that if one was to say, yeah, I have a YouTube channel, like 12 years ago, it's kind of cringy, but who doesn't have a YouTube channel? Like, if you found somebody that plays video games, I Twitch stream. Like, that's not embarrassing anymore. Like, who doesn't do that? So just give it time, man. Give it time. You'll get over it.
Or it'll get worse. I'll get more embarrassed.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, maybe podcasting will just get even worse. And it's kind of like was it like morning zoo radio? You could be on a radio show. I have a radio show, or I have a morning zoo radio show.
Yeah.
So just don't do that, man. Yeah.
Unless there's money in it. I mean, I'll sell out. But thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be here and to talk about probably a very depressing topic, but important, very important to talk about.
I agree. So, where I'm coming from this, because this make it about me real quick. I would.
It is a podcast.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I do need my name in neon behind me. That's a good point. So I went to public school in the 80s and 90s in England, and I think that it was good for me. I think that being surrounded by the demographics that I was surrounded by was really good for me. And being one of a handful of non-white people in my school, I had a really interesting experience. Fortunately, I actually went to a school in a different town from me. So where I grew up, it was nice. I had a nice upbringing, but like, the schools weren't great.
Yeah.
So my mum made a point to send us to the other town, much better school. And I'm kind of I didn't mean to do that. I'm kind of in a similar situation now with my kid, right? We live in an up and coming area. Fortunately, we've found a good school for her locally, right around the corner. I love it. And she's fortunately going to be there for middle school. But high school, I don't know, man. And honestly, I don't know where I would feel comfortable sending her to high school in the 2020s.
Yeah.
I think that school it was scary for me in the 80s and 90s. It seems, sorry, someone dragging a cart down the road. I'm so sorry.
I can't hear it. You're good.
Okay, good. I thought something was about to explode. Okay. That's the copyright. So I went to school in the 80s, and that was scary enough, right? But we didn't have cyberbullying. We didn't have everything being recorded on phone forever. Any fashion faux pas or tripping up and dropping your books down the hallway, that wasn't recorded in there, remixed and used to bully you, right? So the environment is very different.
Yeah.
I think you got me onto the movie, Bo Burnham's movie, 8th Grade.
8th Grade, yeah.
That was a real shocker. And being far away from being a parent when I watched that, it's real insight into American school, right? I didn't do American high school. And so I know that that's very different. So the idea of sending my kid to a public school right now, a public high school, I'm thinking about homeschooling. So I know that you had multiple siblings, have currently, I hope. So how many siblings do you have?
6. So I'm one of 7. Yeah. And I am the 5th in line.
Okay. Wow. And all of you were homeschooled?
So the oldest 2 were in school, I think like early to mid elementary school. And this was South Florida in the 80s. So the story I was always told was that they were pulled out of school because South Florida in the 80s, I don't know if you're aware, not a great place.
Okay.
Yeah. I would recommend the film Cocaine Cowboys just to give you an idea of what was going on. So like that was always the story I was told. It was pulled out because it wasn't a great place. And then we were homeschooled and no one ever went back. It was always just we stayed homeschooled, so then moved. I was born in Florida, but I was only there for like 6 months. So, I don't have the stink on me. We moved to North Georgia and we just stayed homeschooled. So K through 12, what is, everybody's traditional length of time in school. I never went to any sort of structured system. It was always at home.
So do you feel like there was like the experience you get by being around peers and being around other kids? Do you think that you got any of that being surrounded by your siblings? Or is there an experience that you can't have inside your family that you have to have outside of your family?
Yeah, I don't think it's a 1-to-1. Luckily we went to a church that was pretty big. So like I had a good group of diverse people that I was around. So it wasn't like I was only around siblings all the time. I mean, granted, it was still a church in the South. So it was a group of like-minded people. I wasn't getting that much exposure to ideas that were outside of the norm for me. But I was still getting exposed to other people through that. So I still got, the things every child gets, which is, bullied, made fun of. But then I had like a core group of friends, some of which I am still friends with to this day, like people I've known since 3rd grade. Coming up on 30 years, we've been friends.
I think that's the biggest thing that is on my mind when I think about it is like I have this conversation with my daughter very regularly in that, like, given the opportunity, I would keep her at home all day, every day, and we would hang out. Like I would do, what was it, Captain Fantastic? I'd Captain Fantastic the shit out of her. I'd Swiss Family
just go into the wilderness.
Yes, please. I'd love to do that. But obviously, you can't. But I think that the benefit of sending your kid out into the wild there is the bullying, and obviously, one wants their kid to be bullied, and I think there is a sliding scale of bullying, but the friction that you have between people that don't love you the way that your parents love you is really important. And so that's why I say to all the time, like, there are lessons that you need to learn that I can't teach you because, like, morally and like physically, I can't do that to you,
Also, I think there's this exchange of ideas and of like the way people think that happens in a school setting because it is a diverse group of people that you can't get if you're, like I said, like for me going to just church. It was, there were people that were there because their parents made them.
Right.
But like, it wasn't the same way you would see things in a school that you'd be like, oh, I didn't understand people even lived that way. Like that it's so far removed from me. It was still close enough that it was, I mean, I don't think I was sheltered, but I did kind of live in a bubble. Of like, there's this group of people, everyone's kind of the same. And it wasn't until I got older and when I was 18, I switched churches and that helped expose me to vastly different types of people because it was a more progressive church. And like going to work in an office or working in warehouses with people with vastly different backgrounds from different countries, very different belief systems. It helps expand your world in a way that I think a lot of people have at a younger age.
Right.
Whereas I was technically an adult when my expansion of my world started.
But I wonder if that gives you a bit a different perspective and the ability to accept those differences in people. Because growing up, I think it's like Switzerland. Surprise, surprise. They don't have their public schools. Public schools. They don't have private schools, and so rich people go to school with poor kids, and everyone in between, and they get to see how other people live. And then when they grow up and they start businesses, there is no socioeconomic divide between the two. They've grown up around each other and they bolster each other, right? So there is no kind of divide there. But I wonder if that bubble that you're in, if you are an adult and you see a different perspective, is it a bit more jarring to see that people live a different way opposed to growing up with that and just understanding that the people are different?
In some cases, but in a lot of cases, it was more an understanding that the things I was told were wrong.
Oh, shit. Yeah. Do you feel that was an underlying reaction to the things that you were learning? It's like, fuck, I was lied to again. Shit, I did. I was like, another thing from every corner, you find you realize you were lied to.
Kind of, but it had more to do with religious belief than any sort of educational anything.
Yeah.
So for me, education wasn't a focus at all. We were just kind of left to do whatever we wanted all day long. So there was no structured curriculum. There was no workbooks we were going through. We never sat down and had lessons. It was get up in the morning. I guess I'll play this computer game that's supposed to be for fourth graders. I don't really get it. And then I'm going to go outside because I want to go outside. So my experience was so different than a parent like you who's like, no, I want to keep my kid home because I think that's a better situation. And I want to continue the education that was already the foundation that was laid. I never had a foundation.
So all seven of you did that? None of you were nobody sat down and was like, well, I'm actually going to do this. All of you. So during the day, whenever all the rest of the kids are at school, were you in a neighborhood and you were just roaming around the neighborhood, or what was the environment day to day?
So there's also a pretty large age gap with that many kids. So the oldest is 13 years older than me and 18 years older than the youngest. So there's such a wide gap. I don't remember living with her or with the one right below her. So for them, I think when they transitioned from being in public school to being at home, I think it was more structured. But I think as the kids kept coming along, it got more and more lax. Which
right.
With large families in all things is kind of the case. I had so many freedoms as a teenager to just kind of come and go as I wanted. Because by me, it's we've got backups. It's not a big deal. There's more of you. So I think it diminished as it went along. Yeah. And by the time me and my two younger brothers were, supposed to be being educated, there was literally nothing. I remember going over basic alphabet stuff, some basic mathematics, and that was kind of it. And then there was no education beyond that. I never took a written test until I got my learner's permit at 15. That was the first test I ever took.
So were you learning handwriting and stuff like that?
No.
Hot damn. And I feel like I don't know what your handwriting looks like. Do you have good handwriting?
It's garbage. No, it's garbage handwriting.
Okay. Yeah.
But I type all day, so it's not a big
deal. Yeah. It's 2024. Yeah. Nobody needs a pen anymore. Well, yeah, that is very interesting. So you just during the day, all of you were just kind of doing your own thing. There was no documentation that your parents had to submit in order to prove that they weren't, or prove that they were taking care of you.
So, and this is something that is still like a major issue in most states. There's very little oversight into what happens once a child is homeschooled. So, like in Georgia, you had to file a document once a year, like saying you were homeschooling, give the child's information. I do remember like grades being dropped off at one point because I saw my name and like A's. So I'm a straight A student. I mean, I got that going for me. But it was just like, turn that in. And that's kind of the extent of it, because there's legal groups that fight for like parental rights for homeschooling, like no oversight, no nothing. You should be able to pull your kids out of school and not even have to tell the government. Like they want as little oversight as possible. And it leads to cases like mine of like severe neglect educationally, but also more and more cases are coming out of parents who physically abuse their children, then can just pull them out of school and then like these kids die, and it just is what it is. There's no oversight into any of it. So groups like Coalition for Responsible Home Education are working to like pass more laws and get more oversight. So these things don't happen. And because the people that work there, a lot of them have similar stories to me, where there was like, oh no, because I was a girl, my parents didn't think it was worth educating me because that's not my place.
I mean, that strikes very close to home. My wife she went through, it wasn't homeschooling, but she was sent to like religious school, and she didn't, like, she had packets, and like her whole school, she had like a cubicle, and she sat in the cubicle, and they just gave her packets, and she just like worked on packets. And so when we started dating, and like I'd ask her just like regular 20-something questions, she's like, I don't know. And she was, it was essentially a cult. She went to a Christian school, and she was groomed to be a pastor's wife. But she wasn't taught like math and like geometry and stuff like that, because there's no need for it.
Yeah.
And she, knows all about the Bible. We have Bible offs. It's hilarious. But she was not taught the things that you need in order to succeed in life. And then she went to Bob Jones.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm familiar.
I mean, yeah. And the more I hear about that, it is wild. So what you're saying about, my I have a daughter, she doesn't need to learn anything, and I'm a pluralist school. Yeah, that strikes home, and they did that for all of their kids. And like, how could you put your kids into such a disservice? Like, she's on her back foot for the rest of her life.
Oh, exactly. No, there's so many things that I feel incapable of because they're things I had to teach myself. Like, no one taught me how to read. So I couldn't read until I was 10 or 11, because that's when I was able to teach myself how to do it. So learning to read for me was watching movies with subtitles on and recognizing a word. So I didn't know how to phonetically break that word down into its individual components. I knew what a word looked like.
Yeah.
So, which made spelling nearly impossible for me.
Oh, fuck it, especially English.
So, like, I can, if I see it, I know it. But if you asked me to spell it, I couldn't do it.
Sure.
And so even to this day, like reading out loud, I read all the time. Reading out loud makes me extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it was not something I ever practiced. I don't think I read out loud until I had kids, and I read to my kids. So like I was in my mid-20s before I read a page out loud.
What? Yeah, because the way it's kind of like when you read a book, and you're pronouncing the words of cities and people their way, and it makes sense to you. But you try and say it out loud, and it's something completely different. But the word still has the same context. It's funny. I just recently started playing this RPG, Dragon's Dogma, and it's set in like this medieval kind of time, right? And you can make this potion, and it's a draft. It's like whatever draft. And it's funny because when I first moved to America, I was talking to this guy, and he was trying to talk to me about stuff in England that he really likes. He's like a barman, and he was saying that he really likes draught. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Hey, you got beers on tap that you pour them in, but you got the draught ones." And I was like, "Oh, you mean draft?" And it's DRAUGHT. Like, and to be growing up in England, like, you see it's beer on draft,
Mm-hmm.
and like, you want to draft beer, blah, blah, blah. You just know that it's draft.
Yeah.
And so, I've been so removed from English pub culture for so long that like I just, I don't think of it. You don't have draft beer really here in America. And so I started playing this game, and I was like, oh, I made a draught. That's weird. And I thought it was somewhere, and I was like, it's a fucking draft. No. So yeah, you can put your own spin on this, and they mean the same thing until you say it out in public, and yeah,
and then you get embarrassed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
What you taught yourself to read, which you had mentioned that to me years ago, and I've been telling my friends about that for years. It absolutely blows my mind. I can't believe you did that, and it's incredible. And I'm assuming, well, what was it that you were watching that you were able to teach yourself to read?
So, as you know, I love movies.
Really?
When I was like 12 or 13, we got like a Netflix subscription. So like that really expanded a lot. That was more of my education than anything else. But it was just TV. I would turn on TV. I would have subtitles on at all times. And I would just try to pick up what they were saying and try to match those things back.
Gotcha. Do you do that with
just TV shows?
Do you do that with your kids?
Watch TVs with subtitles?
Yeah.
Oh, I watch everything with subtitles still.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. What? Why?
I do not know. I've always done it.
Yeah.
It might just be that tie of like, that's the way I always watched them growing up. So that's the way I watch them now.
You actively go through, like, you'll put something on and you're like, right, let me turn subtitles on. Because I've seen, it seems like our generation and maybe younger, like on TikTok and stuff and Instagram, I'll see people watching TV and they've got subtitles up and it's like English subtitles for an English show.
Do you think it has to do with things like TikTok, where every video they're watching already has subtitles? Do you think that, because to me that makes sense, that if majority of the media they're consuming is on a social platform that has auto-generated captions, or people watching YouTube videos with captions on, Instagram Reels, everybody has their captions going. Like, you edit videos for social media.
Yeah.
You have to put captions on it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's just a carryover.
That makes sense, because, if you're on your phone and you don't want the audio, you can at least stick along with what's going on. But like, why one would sit down in front of a movie and turn the sound off is bananas to me.
I mean, I have the sound on. I just
I'm not crazy.
I mean, not that. Yeah.
Because that was something that I had considered doing with my daughter. Like, we started playing video games years ago, mainly because I wanted her to learn to read and realize that there's context with words, the story, and stuff like that, and the words and the story that we were following had a relation to what we were doing on the screen.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do that for her, and she's a phenomenal reader. She's picked up on it and she loves reading, but I never really found it to be an effective tool. I don't think that she ever really picked up on that part of it. But that's incredible.
I wouldn't recommend it as the way to learn.
Okay.
It's what was available to me.
And it worked.
Because I am such a visual person, I think it made sense to my brain to learn it that way. I mean, I couldn't tell you how my other siblings learned to read. I have no fucking clue.
Can they all read?
I hope so.
Okay.
So I can remember 2 times that like our education or lack thereof was ever a conversation, like in my entire life.
Wow.
When I was 17, a couple of us wrote letters with the worst handwriting and worst spelling imaginable to our parents. And it was just kind of like, hey, we don't understand why this happened. Why did you put us at a disadvantage? And for me, being 17, it was like, oh, all of my friends are about to go off to college. Like, I don't know a 16th of what they know. Like, I have at that point, there's no way I could have gone and taken a GED. I did not have the information because I wasn't given it. And I started working full time at 15. So like at that point, it was just, oh, my lot in life is I'm going to do manual labor.
Right.
That's what's ahead of me because that's what I can do. My capabilities are within these bounds.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of my letter was about that. Of like, hey, I feel like I was put at a disadvantage. I don't understand why. And it wasn't even asking for an explanation. It was saying, hey, my younger brothers are 14 and 11. There's still time to put things in place to help them get on the path they need to be on so they don't have to feel like I feel now or like my older siblings feel, 3, 6, and 9 years ahead of me. So that was the first time it was ever talked about. And I mean, nothing came of it. It is what it was. It was acknowledged by my parents, but that was kind of it. And then when I was 23, 24, I went to a concert with one of my younger brothers. And on the drive back, like out of nowhere, he was like, hey, why do you think mom and dad didn't teach us anything? And like at that point, I wasn't even capable of having that conversation because I don't think I had really done any work to think about it. And I was, my son was like 2 at the time. So like I was dealing with like being a parent and that recontextualizing my relationship to my parents in the way that it does. Like once you have a kid, you're like, oh, I understand why they did this, but also why the fuck did they do this?
Right. Yeah.
And so like there was these internal battles I was having of like trying to figure out for myself what those things mean. And as a parent, trying to understand why they may have done it and almost justify it. Because I think for a long time, I was hesitant to refer to it as abuse, but neglect is abuse.
Yeah.
So like, I didn't even want to think of myself as being a person that was abused because it felt like it diminished people who had more severe abuse than I did. But like, neglect is abuse and abuse is abuse. Like it just is what it is. And so like coming to terms with those things, but those were the only times there's ever been a conversation about it. It was just never discussed.
So you say your parents recognized it, but like, do you think it just kind of got out of hand and it was easier? I mean, with 7 kids, is it easier just to be like
out of sight, out of mind?
Yeah, and they're not ferrying 7 kids to and from school. Like that's a sizable minivan that you gotta have to ferry that many kids around. Well, do you think it just kind of got out of control and it was easier for them that way?
I think so. And I think you also reach a point where like it's not like my mom went to school to be a teacher. So
Shut up. What?
I said she didn't. She didn't.
Oh, okay. Golly. Oh, wow. Okay. Right. All right.
So she didn't. So I think there was a point where even if she was trying with the first few, it's going to get out of hand. And you're going to hit a point where the things they need to learn are things you're incapable of teaching them.
Yep.
That's just natural. Like even with my own kids, like my son is 12, his homework, mostly stuff I never learned how to do. So be like, dude, I can't help you with this. I don't. Yep. We'll Google it together.
Yep. which is problem solving.
Yeah. So I think it getting out of hand is probably part of the case, but then also, and this is me playing psychologist, I think not wanting to recognize the thing you're doing to your child. I feel like we talked about this last time. We're hyper aware of like the ways we're going to fuck our kids up.
Right.
Because we're going to fuck them up somehow. We just want to do it in the least impactful way possible.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was even thought about. It was just kind of don't think about it. They'll be fine. And for me, I don't understand that thought process. I completely understand mistakes that parents make. Everybody makes mistakes. And I can forgive mistakes, but I can't forgive choices. Like negative choices you make, active day after day. I hit a wall where as a parent and just as a human, like you're actively harming someone with your choices. I can't stand by that, no matter what, no matter your intention. And even if you're unaware you're doing it.
Right.
I can't deal with that shit.
Yeah. And I think that's like you're saying, right? Your parents had enough on their plate parenting. Like, just being a parent, and this is something that I'm currently dealing with. Being a parent is one thing, but then also managing school is a lot. Like, all of the things you got to sign up for, and you got to ferry, and you got to be there to the support for upcoming tests. You got to prepare for it. There's a lot that comes along with just dropping off and picking up your kid from school. And so your parents had a hard enough time being parents, let alone trying to manage a fleet of kids going to school. So maybe that was an easier, that was the choice that they made, which obviously was not the right.
But also, that many kids is a choice. Like, it's too many kids.
That is too many kids. That is. Now, was that a religious thing?
I don't think it would be claimed, but I would. It has to be.
Yeah.
Like, go forth and multiply. Like,
did you have a massive house? Were you like the Douglas?
Oh no. I was single income. My dad was a cop, so it's not like we were rolling in it.
Wow, I didn't know your dad was a cop.
Yeah, it's not like we were hurting for anything. Like, I never missed a meal. There was none of that. Things were taken care of. But no, we weren't living in like a 6,000 square foot house or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us shared bedrooms for a long time, but that's also normal for a lot of same gendered children. So like, my brothers and I have bunk beds. Like,
right. Cool. Absolutely.
So,
so, I'm again so proud of you. But and you've made it, right? You're not hurting for anything. Is that the same for the rest of your siblings? Did everybody manage to make it out? Did everybody I mean, the fact that you taught yourself to read is I keep on talking about it. It's phenomenal. But did everybody manage to do that and then turn it around and make it?
Yeah. No, everybody has built a sustainable life. I'm the only one who took like the office job route.
Okay.
I was the only one who pursued that.
Okay.
Like, one brother owns his own business, like a landscaping business. There's 2 firefighters.
Yeah.
One was in construction. So like, everybody made a life. But I know it was difficult. Like, it's not easy to go into those situations or like try to better yourself. Cause for me, even until my son was born, I was like, oh, manual labor is all I will ever do. That is all I am capable of. And that's just, it is what it is.
Well, so this begs the question, and it's something that I am pondering myself. Your family has become successful and can support themselves without an education. So really, how important is it? So I think that the secondary socialization that you get through being around peers and whatnot, invaluable.
Yeah.
But you guys are making lives and paying taxes. Is it important?
So this is something that my wife and I have had conversations about, because like, for me, there will always be a disconnect as to the importance of an education at any level, because I'm like, if they don't get good grades, like, it's not going to kill my kids. Like, I'm fine. I literally never had a grade. Like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I think there's confidence building that comes with being able to do those things, because there are societal norms that I had so many experiences at church, and like, going to a big church, you have big classes, everything is broken down by grade. So like, here's a group of 3rd graders. There's 20 3rd graders in this room. It was the closest thing I got to like an actual like school class. And so it'd be like, hey, can you read from the Bible? You read this passage. And so just being fundamentally incapable of doing that. Like I would have, now I know that they were like panic attacks, but like full on panic attacks, stress headaches. Like,
how did you get out of it? How did you get out? Like, if they called you up to the front to read what did you do?
This is where I think, like, as an adult, they had to know. Like, there had to be people that were aware and just didn't want to say anything. But I would try to get out of it by like joking or like making light of it or like just trying to pass it off to someone else in some way. But there were times where I couldn't get out of it, and I would be like, all right, now I have to go write a word on the board, and I can't write the word because I don't know how to spell it.
Yeah.
And like those would be the moments where whoever was leading the Sunday school class would like recognize what was happening and stop it. I had a brother who was older, but he told, it would just be like, oh, I don't have my reading glasses with me. Just like as a way to get out of it. But I learned to like talk around those things.
Yeah.
Which I do think that's why I've been successful as an account manager. It's like I did learn at an early age how to lead a conversation to get a desired outcome. And that desired outcome was to be able to continue to hide the thing that I was incapable of doing.
Right.
It's a good skill set.
Yeah.
Do I think it's a fair trade? No. I think a huge disadvantage was done to me. I'm not saying like, oh, my life would be better and I would be a doctor if I had gone to school. Would I ever wound up where I still am? Probably, because personality-wise, I think the things I do for work match my personality and my disposition. But the transition would have been easier. Mm-hmm. And then the confidence I have in the things I do, I feel like would be a little better. Because like I said, even now, if I have to read out loud in a presentation, there's like a moment of hesitation for me. Because like I'll always be that third grader in front of the class that didn't know how to read. So it's important. Do I think that everybody needs to go to college? Of course not. Yeah. Like, I think that's, you're just gonna, at this point, gonna get tased for protesting at a college. But I don't think it's necessary for most people to do the things they want to do. But a fundamental education, like teach people how to read, teach them how to do math, and then history, like a concept of time and where we've been, is helpful.
Well, so that's always something that I've had an issue with, and I remember. Let's see. So in England, when you go to take your GCSEs, which I believe is like when you're like 15, you get a choice. That you're up until that point, you're taught what the school wants to teach you, what the curriculum is, and then you have a choice to pick like branching subjects. And so up until like 15, we're always taught about like World War I, World War II, invaders and settlers, the Saxons and the Romans and all this shit, right? And we're just inundated with history because there's a lot of history there and whatever, right? But you know,
and somehow you guys were the good guys every time. It's wild
and always. Incredible, right? We got a lot of books to prove that point. And it's this is a really good point. And we are hit over the head with these stories. And I think it is important to learn your history. But then I had a choice to continue learning about World War II or branch off and do something else. And so I was thinking, I did the American West and the history of medicine. Mm-hmm. Such a random branching option from World War II or whatever. So I just chose something different. And so it's really interesting to learn about American history from a British standpoint, but also to move to America and find out about the Revolutionary War and like the Boston Tea Party. We were never taught that. Surprise, surprise. And so, but I always thought that, why are you trying to teach me these important historical facts and lessons at an age when my hormones are dictating everything that I'm doing? Yeah. And so, like, the idea of teaching a 14, 15-year-old about geopolitical conflict, I'm just horny. And I'm trying to deal with these people. I'm trying to, like, it seems like it's wasted on kids. Yeah.
And I say this as a person who's never been to school, but it seems like a lot of just, we got to fill the time.
Yeah.
Like, we got to make this stretch 8 hours. So we're going to teach them this stuff. Here's the stuff.
And that stuff I found interesting in my 20s.
Exactly. And that's what everybody says. Everybody says, I hated history until I was 25. And then I was like, oh, no, this stuff is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you have context. You have time.
Exactly.
And what you're saying is a really good point that, it's time to, you just have to fill the day. You got, and something that my mum was always said that she hated the idea of you have kids and you have them up until they're like 6 and then you got to hand them over.
Yeah.
And then their world is dictated by their peers. And, there are a lot of kids that are just dropped off at school because their parents don't want to fuck with them. It's like, and they're certainly not parenting them when they come home. And it's just like, fucking take these kids. And your kids are surrounded by that. And you have, and then they spend most of their days with people that are teaching them stuff that they probably don't give a shit about. The teachers just trying to make a paycheck. And these kids are just kids influencing your kids. And so, like you're saying, it would be nice to have some kind of control over what your kids are being taught, opposed to it just being filler. So your kids, what's your approach to your kids' education?
They're in public school. I think that if there was ever a point where they came and they were like, hey, I would rather be homeschooled, I would be open to the conversation. Knee jerk is always going to be a no for me, just due to my experience.
Yeah.
Like, because mine was so negative and so bad, that's the only context I have for it. But I know so many people that were homeschooled and it was a fantastic environment for them.
Right.
Like, they sat down and it was structured.
Yeah.
And they were so far ahead of kids in public school because all the fluff was cut out. There was no filler. They were able to advance really, really quickly. They were able to graduate early, go to college early, like, because they didn't have to worry about, all right, it's just, we got to make 8 hours. Got to do 8 hours today. So let's fill it with stuff. So I know it can be done. It's not something I am capable of. I cannot sit down. I can't teach my kids algebra. I never learned algebra. Like, that's not something I could do. There's plenty of programs online that could help with that. So if it was something they genuinely wanted, I think it's worth a conversation.
Yeah.
It's never something I would be like, hey, we should do this. Just because for me, I will always view it negatively. There's just no way I think I could get over that.
A colleague of mine packed his family up and was traveling around in an RV, and his kids were doing high school on the RV. And there are online components that can really lead the kids in a great direction. And even the homework that my daughter does, and if it's anything similar to what they do in class, they have laptops. But the way that they are teaching these kids algebra and spelling, it is so much more engaging than a teacher with a chalkboard writing stuff out. It really is enjoyable to engage in it and learn that way. But what I heard about these kids on the RV was that part of the class that this high school kid was doing was he had to start an LLC. That's good information. Like, we don't learn about balancing a checkbook at school, but there are classes and curriculum that actually sets kids up for success that isn't teaching kids the history of medicine at 15. But so something that we had spoken about as well is like overcompensating as a parent because of your past trauma. Do you not feel that you would do everything in your power to not give them a bad homeschooling experience? Or do you think that you're too you're too affected by you don't want to touch it?
There's always going to be the part of me that feels like I'm incapable of teaching people things. I think that's just ingrained in me. And, but also, like, there's the work component. I'm working all day. So, like, I know I can't give the attention that is needed.
Yeah.
I couldn't sit down and be like, all right, now we're going to work on this for an hour, or here's the focus for the day. So for me, as someone with a full-time job, it's just not an option for me to do it in a way that I would feel comfortable with it.
I wonder if there's, are there like qualifications that one has to have in order to say, okay, I'm going to homeschool my child. I have these accreditations. See, that would make sense.
It's literally a piece of paperwork. You file a piece of paperwork. Yeah. So anyone can do it. And like I said, there's almost no oversight in most states.
Yeah.
Some states you don't even have to, beyond the initial paperwork saying you are going to homeschool, then you never check in again. Like that. That's it.
Wow.
So there's no safeguards in place to make sure these kids are getting the education they need. I think it goes back to something we talked about of like parents viewing their children as a product,
right,
as a person, and most people that are making laws are fine with parents owning a child. Like you own them, so it doesn't matter what you do with them.
Yeah,
you can hit your kid as long as there's not a bruise. Because it's discipline. It's fine. If you want to pull your kid out of school because you don't think a woman needs to learn anything beyond cooking and sewing, like you don't have to do that. I mean, that was your wife's experience.
Yeah.
So like, it's this idea of freedom, but that freedom makes the child a captor. Like, it's super dangerous.
So I honestly, I just, it could be the algorithm latching onto. I just saw a post about a lady who's complaining about her son who's 9, who doesn't want to read, and she's trying to teach him to read, but he doesn't have any desire to. And she said she claimed that she was unschooling her kid. Have you heard of this unschooling movement?
Is that where you just do nothing?
I didn't look into it, but I mean,
because if so, then my parents are like ground level unschoolers.
But you know, it's kind of like what I'm saying about like learning history at 15. Like, why would I want to? That you obviously wanted to learn to read, but as a 9-year-old, especially with like the opportunity to just play Fortnite all day, why would I want to read?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in school, like we're saying, you're forced to. You're captive in this box, and they're going to force you to learn to read, which is a good outcome. But
also, the peer pressure helps. Like, if you are capable, and it's just a choice of I don't want to do it, you're getting left behind. When all of your peers are capable of doing something, and there is a level of embarrassment and social shame that I think is good for a person. Like, it's good to be a person that bathes. Like, you don't want to go in public and be like, oh, this dude fucking smells like shit all the time. It's just he chooses not to bathe.
Right.
So I think some of those social pressures are good, and I think a classroom can have those positive effects. Again, for someone who is fully capable of it. If there's any sort of, and I say this is a parent of 2 ASD kids, like there's things that my daughter struggles with where she can't keep up with the class.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I would never try to pressure her in any way for things that she's learning how to do that don't make sense to her brain yet.
Yeah.
Because it will one day, and it's fine that it doesn't right now.
Absolutely.
But outside of that, any capable child who just chooses not to, a little bit of peer pressure helps.
You tapped onto something there, like being the stinky kid in class.
You saying as the former stinky kid, or just?
I befriended the stinky kid. I felt really bad for him, and that turned out to bite me in the ass, which is hilarious. But anyway, but being a stinky kid in class, somebody should have intervened. There's no way that the teacher doesn't smell you. And as kids, you're just going to make fun of that kid. Mm-hmm. But as a full-grown adult, you should recognize that this 12-year-old is pissing himself. How do you not intervene, right? How do you not intervene when you know that the kid that you keep on calling up to the front of the class can't spell? Like, there are obviously signs, right? And do you think that it was because this was a church situation that you were in where they weren't legally required to report that kind of stuff? What kind of signs are there, and like what should have been done? What can be done?
To me, as an adult now, as a kid, I thought I was great at hiding it, the same way kids think they're great at hiding everything.
Right, yeah.
But now as an adult, I know it's an impossibility that people weren't aware.
Yeah.
Like, just is. I do think there's this kind of like perfect storm of things. Yeah, it was church, so there is things get buried the way it works. Church. There's a certain image that needs to be upheld. Also, my parents were very well respected people at the church. Like everybody knew our family. Like how could you not? There were so many of us.
Sure.
But also, like, my dad was a cop. He worked security at the church. My mom volunteered. Some of my older siblings worked at the church on like custodial staff. So like, it was just, we were known. And I think it was easier to just ignore it than to be a problem or raise your hand or point a finger at people that are respected in the church. Then also he was a cop. So like there is a level of protection there. I do remember at one point DFACS or Child Protective Services was called, probably by a neighbor.
Okay.
Nothing came of it.
Yeah.
Because that's the way it goes. Like, I don't remember anyone talking to me about it. I just remember someone coming to the door. Most likely my dad knew who that person was. Like, they worked together. So, so even like someone who may have tried to do the right thing, no meaningful action was taken in it. But now, being on the other side of it, like if for people that see a child struggling in those situations, like, hey, if there's an 11-year-old who can't read and can't spell, it's worth a conversation with that kid of asking them about, hey, what's going on, or any way I can help you. But like, if there's a clan of children, and you see them just like roaming the yard all day long, it's worth investigating what's actually going on. You know, I don't. Nobody wants to like get in their neighbor's business, but like, you see a kid that's having a difficult time.
And like with the perspective of, like you were saying, you were a kid and you thought you were really good at hiding it. Mm-hmm. That's a full-grown adult, but there's no way that they didn't see that and they made that choice. Yeah. So look, you said that you've not really spoken to your siblings about it, but your siblings have, and yourself have spoken to your parents about it. And what was the response? So what you said they acknowledged it, but like, what was the response? What was their reason behind this?
Well, and honestly, it wasn't even a conversation. It was a letter.
So they didn't write a letter back that everyone shared, or like got everybody together?
Yeah, I remember like a phone call, and it was like, yeah, sorry kind of thing, but like no meaningful anything came of it. I think there was a conversation of like, well, would you like to go to school? Because like at this point, I'm so far behind, like it would just be embarrassing to like get dumped into public school at my grade level and not know how to do any of it. Yeah. Like that does more damage than good. So it just, nothing really came of it. And everything just kind of swept under the rug. This might shock you, I'm a little bit of a pain in the ass and I tend to be loud. It's something that has increased over the years. Like I was always a very quiet child. At home, I just didn't speak a lot. Like I was just quiet. I was very internal. And then as part of like my world expanding and as I was coming to terms with things that were happening around me, I've become more and more vocal about things, and then just becoming a parent to really just fuck it all. Like I'm going to be loud.
Yeah.
And so I became, I guess, the black sheep of the family. Like when I left the church, of like, hey, no, I'm not a Christian at all. Like this isn't my thing anymore. Yeah. Like I'm not angry about it. I'm not bitter about it, but it's not for me. Kind of my wife and kids were kind of excluded from things because of that. Cause like, oh, now we're not part of that clan.
Right.
But there was never a conversation about it. Like it was just, we don't want to confront it. We don't want to ask questions. Yeah. Whereas like if there's things that I believe and my kids believe something opposite. I want to have a conversation about it because I want to understand their viewpoint.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, there was no conversation. It was just, oh, that different now. We don't like, let's not acknowledge, let's not talk about it. And so that's always just been kind of the way it works. Of if something is uncomfortable, we don't want to talk about it. And Zach's going to be the one that is like a pain about it.
Right.
There was some disagreement. Somebody had said something to my wife at one point, and I don't fuck with that. And so like that's pretty much what I said. It was like, hey, fuck you. Like if you have a problem, let's talk about it.
Right.
But then they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's will be pleasant to your face. It's very Southern. Pleasant to your face. It should talk to you behind your back.
Yeah.
So, and that's just not the way I operate. So yeah, no conversations were ever had about any of it. And I'm sure because I can see the analytics of who listens to episodes of this. I'm sure people in my family will listen to this.
Yeah.
Won't like it. I know people that they go to church with have probably listened. And it's not something that will turn into a conversation. And it's not something where I would ever be reached out to about it.
It won't be a conversation with you, but they'll talk about it within,
of course,
the circles. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it will just be me viewed as the problem of me
that was
rocking the boat. And me being the victim. Like it's going to be like, oh, he wants to be a victim or he's bitter.
Right.
Which is why I struggled to really even talk about it for so long. Because like, I know it's easy to come across. It's like, oh, fuck my parents. Right. And like, that's not the case. For me, there's no anger or bitterness or resentment. It's just full separation. Like, I didn't matter enough to you for you to give me what I needed. So you don't matter enough to me for me to have a conversation or a relationship with you. And I think people struggle with that.
Yeah. And I think that, there must be some shame there. And so it's easy, but if you bring it up for the, to be, oh, I'm sorry, I was such a bad parent.
Exactly.
And easy to just kind of step away from it than actually admit and have a conversation. So your siblings, did everybody stay in the church or did everybody separate?
No, I'm the only one that broke off in any way.
Wow.
Everybody lives within like 15 minutes of each other. It's
and they're all still in the church or is this religious?
Wow. Even more so. Like there's people who like weren't and then have, as they've gotten older, like kind of doubled down on it. Where I was the opposite. I was the one that was fully bought in.
Right.
I lived it. Like it was 100% who I was. And then after my son was born, I'm like, oh, we're good. Not for me.
I mean, that would be, I think it's a bit much to ask to have a sit down and actually own up to that. That doesn't seem to be a conversation that's going to be had at all.
And nothing would come of it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not looking for an apology. I'm not looking for a change. And I wouldn't expect one because like I said, it's not something I'm angry about.
Right.
There's not like bitterness and resentment. It happened. And yes, it was wrong.
Yeah.
But it's not someone I have a relationship with. So like So
I've as I said before, right at the beginning, I've considered it. It certainly seems a little romantic to me. But I know that there are groups. So there are groups here in my town where you can meet up with other kids that are being homeschooled. And so you do have that secondary socialization. But do you know other people that were homeschooled? Do you have things that
Yeah. So at church, there was a homeschool group of like multiple families who would meet up and like have, I don't know if it was like classes together, but they would meet up and have like groups.
Yeah.
So they were able to get more of like a school setting than just, being at home and then going to church. They kind of found a way to blend it.
Yeah.
And it was something I was interested in being a part of, but it was something that we were told, no, like this isn't, we won't be a part of that because it would expose like,
yeah.
But most of them, as far as I know, just, they had really good experiences with it. They all graduated, they've all gone to college and they've all, built careers beyond that.
Yeah.
So for them, it was a helpful experience. It can be done right.
Right.
I would
See,
say.
that is what I kind of want to lean towards, at least like kind of discuss slightly. Like, you have had a bad example,
Mhm.
an experience of it. You sounds like you know people that have had good experiences.
Yeah.
You think that, and you said, you're not qualified for it. And like I said, if there was like a 6-month program that you could get certified so that you can homeschool your kids, that seems like a reasonable avenue. But do you feel like there are positives and it could be a good thing?
Mhm. Yeah, I do. And there was a segment on Last Week Tonight on John Oliver's show about homeschooling.
Love it.
And so like they go into the horror stories of it, of like, hey, here's neglected kids. And for people interested, there's a book called Educated by Tara Westover.
Okay.
And it is like almost a one-to-one of my experience, like from a large religious family, not taught anything.
Yep.
Unless she pursued it herself. And she tells a story about she went to college and she was in a history class and someone mentioned the Holocaust and she asked what it was because she had never heard of it before.
Yeah.
It wasn't something they thought was worth telling her about, and she hadn't watched TV or movies.
Yeah.
So like had no context for it. So that's a really good example of like worst case scenario. But in that episode of Last Week Tonight, they talked to people who like, no, I've thrived. Like going out of public school for me has been phenomenal, whether it be an underserved or underfunded school system where they can pull it out and be like, no, here's all of these resources online. Here's companies that specialize in working with kids who are homeschooled, full curriculum online, full grading, full testing. They have accreditation, so it's not you getting a GED, you are getting a high school diploma. So there's plenty of places where people can find those good resources, and some of them are free within your state.
Wonderful.
Like, so there's a lot of good options.
Yeah.
So I don't want to tell people not to do it. Just, make sure you do it right. But if, like in your situation, I know you're not going to pull your daughter out of school and be like, all right, this is it.
Yeah.
Go watch Cartoon Network.
Right. It is funny because we were looking at schools and she's going to be moving into middle school, and I did say to her, I was like, how do you feel about homeschooling? And she's like, yeah, no, not really. And to me, it seems strange because if I was given the opportunity, like, oh, I can just like wake up whenever I want and I do my own work whenever I want. Yeah, please. But there is a lot. That was something that tripped in my mind towards the end of my high school career. Was like, why am I complaining about going to school? I'm surrounded by my friends.
Yeah.
Every day, all I do is fucking cut up with my buddies. And, this is excellent. But also, that was kind of my approach to my education. Like I said, I was dealing with so much more than trying to get good grades. It was more about trying to fit in and and all that. Like,
you're an artist; it's to be expected.
That's true, right? Yeah, really.
You may have taken the history of medicine, but you weren't going to be a doctor.
Thank you. No, but and that's a really good point as well. I do. There is obviously a great reason to go to school.
Yeah.
You're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a lawyer. Go to school.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of money to be made and financial security to be had from being a plumber, an electrician. Vocations are very necessary.
Also, I've told people, like, when people say they don't know what they want to do, just be like, go into marketing.
Mm-hmm.
You can get an entry-level job in marketing and you can learn the ropes. And if you're good at it, you can make a very good living.
Yeah.
And would a degree help you get in? Sure. Is it worth the debt? No, of course not.
No. That was one of the things that happened to me, going to art school and realizing that the job that I could get fresh out of art school, what kind of entry level position I could get with that, and how much I would get paid against how much I owed.
Yeah.
What is happening here? The debt that I have is nowhere close to the entry level position that I'm going to have to get.
Yeah. No, as long as people have the fundamentals and they're taught all the things they will need to be an adult who can function in the world.
Yeah.
Like the rest of it should be optional. Yeah. You should know some history. You should know biology. You should understand mathematics. Like those things are important. Does everybody need to take algebra too? Of course.
Right. But you do need to take home ec. Like you need to know how to make some rice.
Yeah.
You need to know how to work an oven and like separate the stuff in your fridge so you don't cross contaminate. And those are things that I learned from working in restaurants. You know, and I think also every single American needs to work in a restaurant at some point in their life, or at least customer
or retail. Yeah,
retail. Yeah,
everybody has to work a Black Friday. Like that should be just the law.
Yes, yeah. We don't have we didn't have Black Friday in England when I was there, but I did seasonal work at Toys R Us. And I worked there during Christmas and like right after Christmas, and to see what people were doing, like returning stuff and just irate people, changed me. Changed me. And same with in restaurants. Like this did not work out for me, but like I don't want to be bothered when I'm at a restaurant. Like, thank you for bringing my drink. If I need anything, I'll flag you down. And that was my approach to people when I was waiting on them. I was like, you good? I'm gonna leave you alone. I wasn't the guy with the flair and like, hey, I didn't do that.
You didn't sit down in the booth with them to take
right. Hey, scooch over, buddy. Well, you get some garlic nuts. You garlic nuts to the table. But it was those guys that did. The guys that did that were fucking making bank. And
and not to say it was all negative with homeschooling, but I got a lot of home ec in. All right, I'm a really good cook. I spent a lot of time. Teaching myself to cook. So
wonderful.
You know, was it worth not knowing how to read until puberty? Probably not. But I'm a really good cook.
Yeah, souffle is incredible. So now, do you feel like there are any negatives to your experience? Like you obviously, as you said, you're supporting your family. You're a successful guy. Obviously, there are emotional, traumatic responses to what's happened. But how do you feel it has affected you in your career and in your life? Because this was your path.
I don't want to say that like it helped me on my path, because I don't ever think there's a positive to any form of abuse. I don't ever want to frame it that way. But I do think that I learned to navigate in certain ways that have helped me be successful. Some positive, some negative. I think that it helped shape my brain in a way to be good at capitalism, which is a bad thing. But it did form my brain in a way where like, okay, I know what I have to get out of this. Like everything had to be very transaction oriented.
Right. Yeah.
I have to understand the outcome because I need to try to control what's happening.
Instead of just kind of floating along with the situation, you're always presented with like, how am I going to deal with this situation?
Yeah. So like, I think that it did form my brain in a very specific way that has probably helped me be successful.
Yeah.
It did help me learn how to drive conversations in a certain way. I'm really good at interviewing for jobs like that. For me, if you could get paid to interview for jobs, I would be a very rich man because I fucking love it and I'm good at it. But I think for me, there's so many negatives that came with it. Like the imposter syndrome is unreal. Like I will never not feel like a fraud.
Yeah.
Because I will always feel like where I'm at in my career, I got to through fraudulent means.
Right. Yeah. And when it's you that is teaching yourself the skills, you don't know whether you've done the right thing or not.
Yeah.
And so you don't have the security of my teacher taught me this. So it must be right. Yeah.
Or also like learning how to do things I didn't learn how to learn the way most people do.
Yeah.
Like, I can't sit down and read something and learn it in the same way that someone, not that everybody can, that's not everybody's thing.
Right.
Or like tests. I can know all the answers, but if there's a test I have to take, like I'll fucking blow it because I don't know how to take tests.
Yeah.
It's not for me.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of negatives, but I think I've made the best of the situation because I just kind of accept it as it is what it is, and I have to move on no matter what. Like, I'm not going to dwell on something that I had no control over and that I can't change. So,
So what was your wife's experience? Like, if I know that when I found out about my wife's experience in school, we supported each other. Like I know her downfalls, and we bolster each other. So, but what was your wife's experience in school? Did she have something similar?
oh no, just standard public education.
Yeah.
So like nothing wild. But then like telling her about it, I think not that she didn't believe me, but there's always this like, and I'm sure you had the same experience when your wife was telling you, like, it doesn't make sense.
Mm.
Of
Yeah.
like, well, no, obviously that's not what happened. And not like she doesn't believe me,
Yeah.
but it's so foreign to most people to be like, oh no, I was taught nothing.
Yeah.
There was no education. Like, and there wasn't even a push to try to teach me. It was just, all right, go do whatever you want to do today.
Yeah.
So I think there was confusion and then rightfully so anger. Because she wouldn't want someone hurting me, and she knows that
Right.
that was a person choosing to hurt me. So yeah, she had the opposite experience of me, but she's
Okay.
been great about like knowing that there are things I'm sensitive about around it. Like education will always be a sensitive topic for me because I will always feel inadequate
Right.
when it comes to it.
So you are able to support each other in the downfalls and the abilities that you have. Do you know of any support groups or any advocacy groups out there that are there for people that have had experiences like this?
Yeah, so there are. I've seen like Facebook groups for like just homeschooled kids, like homeschooled adults who were homeschooled and had a bad experience. But the best resource I have found has been Coalition for Responsible Home Education. And they're doing a ton of advocacy work around changing the laws in certain states or even just getting the word out. They're doing a lot of tracking the data of like, hey, here's how many kids are homeschooled. Here's what in each individual state the current regulations are. Here's things that should be happening. Like here's safeguards that could be in place. So they're a really good resource. And then they can help for people who are trying to get connected at a more local level, can help source those things and can help point people the right direction. That's the best one I found. In looking into it, it gets kind of murky because like you'll look into like homeschool groups or any sort of like keywords around that, and you'll get like really shady groups who have just done a good job of SEO.
Yeah.
And so like you'll look on their page and be like, oh no, I think this is just like a right-wing group that is trying to abuse children.
And that was going to be a question that like, do we know whether there's certain demographics or different specific areas in the country where it's more prevalent to be homeschooling your kids? Because if there's these like nut job cults out there just having kids and teaching them how to field dress animals and shoot rifles and stuff, like probably an army of little Mad Max kids out there.
So I think there's this idea that it's mostly like religious nuts.
Yeah.
Because for most of us, that's kind of the viewpoint we saw it as. It was like, oh, there's like the weird homeschooled family. And they're super religious and they all dress the same. Like that was kind of what most people thought, especially like the 90s. But actually the demographics are like, it's a very wide array of like all types of people, all types of belief systems, every kind of demographic you can possibly imagine, and in every state. So and actually with COVID, a lot of people went home when schools closed and then just that worked better for them. So they homeschooled after that. And it's being done properly. So it's a lot different. I think the number I saw was like 2 million kids, which is a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not as segmented as I thought it would have been.
Right.
Just because like all the people I knew that were homeschooled were all Southern Baptist families.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Wow. That's crazy. That my wife's family is Southern Baptist, and they kind of took that approach to it as well. Look at that. Wow. Well, I mean, I'm definitely going to look into these advocacy groups, and I honestly finding out about my colleague who was teaching his kids on his RV, and just the lessons that they were being taught that were way more beneficial for them in the long run.
Yeah.
It did seem appealing. But I think that you have to supplement that with the secondary socialization. You have to have them out there with other kids. But I think that the American education service system is doing a disservice for the kids. And, I think that I don't know what school's like in England, but I know that I learned how to cook. I learned how to like sew clothes. I learned how to, music, art. And I know a lot of that is being pulled out of schools these days. And I know that like kids would say that they want to be a footballer when they grow up. Like that's all they want to do. But now kids want to be YouTube stars and Twitch streamers. Like that idea of what is necessary to become successful, very different now.
Yeah. That's why we should supplement with coding and video editing classes. Like those are such good skills. If you can learn to code at a young age, you're set for life. If you can learn good video editing, like you will never go without a job.
Yeah.
Like there's so many skills like that 10 years ago were probably impractical.
Yeah.
But now they're almost necessities.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard about a kid who he's like 16. And he just kind of met up with a guy who was doing like an urban garden in his house, like in his backyard. And he was getting very good traction from it. And this kid, 16, he's making like a sizable income just from editing his videos. And, when I was 16, the best thing you could do is like maybe, get a paper route and maybe you go pick up glasses at the pub. That's how you made money. But now you can make, a sizable income just from editing somebody's gardening videos. It's a different different environment out there.
And there's so many more like alternative schooling options where it's like truncated days of you do 5 hours instead of 8 hours. And it's like there's schools, especially being in Maine, where it's like, oh, these are more nature focused. Like we do class outside.
Yeah.
Not during the winter, obviously.
Yeah.
But like switching up the focus and having it be less about, hey, you have to know all these things about the Revolutionary War. You have to be able to take a test on this because it's not practical. No. Is it good? Yeah, probably. It's probably good to learn that. But alternative schools where that's less the focus, grades are not the focus. Like the focus is understanding a concept and mastering that concept.
Right.
And not just, hey, you're at the same level as everybody else in the class. Okay, cool. You pass. Because that works for like herding people through a system.
Yep.
But it doesn't work on an individual one-on-one basis or catering to the way people learn. So I think that will continue to grow. More people will learn in those alternative settings or in homeschool settings. I don't think homeschooling is going to diminish. I think it's going to continue to grow. Like you said, there's more and more people who are like, oh, we sold our house. We live in an RV now. Yeah. Like there's so many more options for people. Hell, I picked up and moved 1,200 miles, like on a whim. So it's
wow. Yeah. And you seem happier for it.
It was still 48 degrees this morning. I would love spring. It's
soon. It'll be coming soon. Beautiful here.
Yeah, in June we'll get our first spring morning.
And then you can start doing classes outside. Yeah, it'd be nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I really appreciate it, man. Like everything you said has been really eye-opening. And it's crazy that your experience, it seems similar to an experience that I'm so close to.
Yeah.
And that that conversation that you have with people that have gone through it is, yeah, it's eye-opening and seems to be different, but also there are underlying similarities, even though the experience is so different.
Yeah. No, to me, it's important that I talk about it because, like, the more I talk about it, the more people are like, oh yeah, no, same. Like, and it was something that, and I'm sure your wife felt the same way of like, it felt so unique to me while it was happening
Right.
that like, I was like, there's no way anyone else is experiencing this. This can't
Right.
be happening to other people because it's
Yeah.
like a wild thing to happen.
Yeah.
But I just keep meeting more and more people where it's the case. They're like, oh no, yeah, we just stayed at home. We did the home part of homeschooling.
Right.
Like,
Homeschool.
yeah, we were homed.
Right. While you were at school.
So I think it's important to talk about it and to like help people feel less alone in that because it, even as an adult, it can feel isolating.
Yeah.
And you can feel like something's wrong with you because as a kid, I just felt like I was dumb. Like it was, that's just how I always felt. I was like, everybody else can do it. I can't. Like clearly I'm the problem. So I think it's good to normalize it and then finding resources. And then I would recommend, if your wife is a reader, Educated by Tara Westover.
Love it.
Really, like I read a lot, but that was the book where I was like, oh, I connect with this. Like I feel this.
Oh, she's a reader. She's a reader. So yeah, maybe I'll get that for her. That's interesting.
So, but no, thank you for having me on, Ross.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. My pleasure. I hope to have you on again some other time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Give it 5 stars, because my dad is awesome and cool.